Hello, this is Bailey Kiernan, and I wanted to talk for just a few minutes about a social justice issue that I feel is important and skimmed over far too often in the discussion of equality. The issue I am referring to is that of women in combat roles. For starters, we have the Declaration of Independence that states the following: all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. During that time, using the word men was a generalized term covering all humans, and last I checked, women are humans, not to mention pretty dang important ones at that. Then you have the Second Amendment that can be summarized by saying that any person, male or female, have the right to bear arms for the security of a free state. Seems as though in 1789, the notable people of our nation had inadvertently started laying the foundation for the inclusion of women in combat. What negatives come from women in combat? Well, let's be honest. The only real negative I see coming from including women in combat would be sexual assault allegations stemming from male soldiers not being able to think properly with the right head and getting themselves into a situation that they would not want to be in to start with. Really, that's the only negative I can see when putting a woman in any position of power. What positives come from women in combat? Well, for starters, I believe they have better communication skills. Traditionally speaking, women are better problem solvers than men because they communicate during the process, whereas men have a tendency to close themselves off and attempt to problem solve in solitude to flaunt their knowledge and ability to handle that situation on their own. A great example of this would be relationships. Women will try to reach out to their significant other to get an idea of what is going on in their mind. I know of this from personal experience, so trying to convince me of otherwise is kind of a moot point. To touch on this with a little bit more detail, I have the hardest time trying to explain my feelings to my girlfriend, and subsequently, I shut down while having a knot in my throat the whole time. With that taken into consideration, having women in combat will keep open-ended conversations flowing through the entirety of missions. Another positive would be effectiveness. This can be considered as a blanket term, and I think we're wrong to do that. Everyone, men included, will have different gifts or talents, so it isn't fair to put them under inaccurate categories or classifications based purely on history. That would be like saying only women should be receptionists because it isn't manly enough of a job for a man to do. The same can be said about engineers or doctors. Some of the best and brightest in those fields have been women. An example for an engineer would be Hedy Lamarr for her invention of remote control communication systems during World War II for the U.S. military that ended up serving as a basis for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi that we use today. Another one would be Stephanie Louise Kwolek for her discovery of liquid crystalline polymers that actually ended up resulting in Kevlar. And then for doctors, there's Elizabeth Blackwell, who became the first woman to receive a medical degree in the U.S. And then there was Mae Jemison, who you may remember from the Space Shuttle Endeavour back in the 90s. But she was also a physician, not to mention that astronaut. And because of this, she was actually the first African-American woman in space. And then one other positive that I see of including women in combat would be actually inclusion. Canada, of all countries, was one of the first to include women in combat teams, ranging from short spells to entire tours. During those tours, women were able to change the minds of their male soldier compatriots. A British soldier once said, "We had a female medic, and she was awesome. She carried the same weight as the blokes. She was doing her job, performing as well or better than the men. Why should sexuality affect cohesion? How do we know that this wouldn't have happened if we implemented more women in combat in the United States military as well?" These were just a few important topics I wanted to touch on about why women should be included in combat. The fact this is currently a social justice issue is, in my opinion, a non-issue, and goes to show just how far as we as a country and global community still need to go for equality in all facets.